Hey folks, my name's Kevin and it's time for some incredibly cool new pen nerdery. Yeah, I know. I just posted a video on pens recently. My channel's called Knife Nerdery. Why am I focusing so much on pens right now? Well, first of all, I love EDC pens. And second of all, I don't control when incredibly innovative, amazing new pens hit the market, and you definitely need to hear about this one. This is the Retract Click pen from Aerocrafted. It's got a brand new mechanism and it's doing some really, really interesting things. Not only do I have both sizes here to compare and help you figure out which size is the right fit for you, but also I think I can explain why this is one of the most compelling pens to hit the market in a really long time, especially if portability is a key factor for you. And also, this video is actually going to be a giveaway video. So the folks at Aerocrafted were kind enough to send me a brand new version of the Parker size. That's the one I think is probably the more compelling option for most people to give to one of you just for watching. Now, all of the details for how to enter, who's eligible, all that kind of fun stuff, how to know when you win, how to avoid scammers, all that kind of stuff is going to be at the end of this video. And yes, if you want to just click straight ahead to that, I'll even put chapter markers down below. But I think you're definitely going to want to watch this video, learn about this pen and about this company in general, because man, now you might have actually seen these floating around already on like the Machine Pen subreddit or something. I've actually had this one for almost 2 full months because this was originally released as a Kickstarter and I got in on the early bird. And so I've been using this a lot. And I've had this one for roughly about 3 or 4 weeks. They were kind enough to send this one along when they sent the one for giveaway. And so I've been using this one as much as I can for nearly a month. Let's back up and just talk for a moment about what is Aerocrafted. I love this company. They are by far one of my favorite companies in the EDC space because they are exactly the kind of EDC company that I love, because they are huge nerd engineers that are approaching design from a very small details engineering perspective. If you've never heard of them before, they are a small machine shop down in San Luis Obispo, California that works in the aerospace industry. They do custom fabrication for aerospace as their day job, but they're all a bunch of gear nerds. And so they realize that they have the engineering and design know-how and the manufacturing capability to create the perfect version of EDC tools that they would want out in the world. And so they just did it kind of as like a side project. And they're just such cool people. It's a really small shop. They do everything in-house. I think there's only like 5 of them working there total. I got to meet Henry at PNWCI. He's the guy that manages like their Instagram account. If you talk to them on Instagram, he's the guy you're talking to. But I also got to do an incredibly long full shop tour and interview with the founder named Trace. Sometime last year, I filmed the entire thing. I've been sitting on that for a while because it's taken me a while to figure out how to edit it correctly. It will be up at some point. But anyway, let's back up for a moment. I first learned about them by learning about this product. This is their side slip retractable EDC utility knife. And it is so freaking cool. There's so many incredible little details here going on. And the reality is, when you get into the high-end EDC utility blade knife space, you're talking normally about stuff kind of like this. This is the Ruck V2 from Giltech. This is, I forget exactly what they call this, but this is Turnback Knife Co.'s little retractable one. This is the TPT Slide from Big Idea Design. And this is the kind of stuff that you deal with in the high-end EDC space. And I don't want to say, I'm not knocking these things at all. I love these. These are all fantastic products. But this is what is considered an ultra-thin, light, portable product in this space. But when you compare it to this, holy crap. Now you can kind of see what I mean when I titled this video, what happens when aerospace engineers design an EDC product. Because the whole concept, what's going on there when you're doing aerospace design is you are trying to minimize the amount of weight that you have while maintaining the kind of strength and structural integrity you have. That's a kind of approach and mindset to engineering that most people just don't know how to do, aren't practicing doing, or aren't even thinking to do in the first place. But it's the kind of thing that allows them to create the absolute thinnest, lightest micro version that is still incredibly strong, incredibly rigid, and incredibly usable. I absolutely love it. Oh, and if you're interested in picking one of these up for yourself or one of these pens or any of their other stuff that they make, I have a discount code, Knife Nerdery. It'll save you 15% off literally anything in the store. That's just Knife Nerdery, all one word. Use it at checkout, save 15%. And there's so many little details. And all of this kind of design thinking and engineering carries over to these pens because this pen has 2 killer factors. One is the mechanism. We'll talk all about that, how this works, disassemble it, everything like that. But the big thing that I think I want to talk about right off the bat, and I think the thing that makes this the most compelling, regardless of what kinds of mechanisms you like, or if you even care that it is a novel mechanism, what makes this so compelling is its size, because this is a small pen. This is a small pen. It's not a tiny pen. This is tiny, but this is a small pen that fits a full Parker refill. And to give you a sense of scale and what I really mean when I say that, let's look at some other things right now. So yeah, this is a good lineup. This is the Tactile Turn Mini Slim Side Click, and this is the Oz Machine Co. Lil Jon. And previously, these were my favorite ultra portable, ultra minimalist EDC pens. They're not necessarily my favorite EDC pens, period, for any kind of use case, but if it's something that I'm taking with me, or especially if it's something that like I'm going to try and stick into a field notes book to take somewhere on the go. This is my film studies class. And so every single week I slide one pen into this and I take it and shove it in my pocket and go. And for that kind of use case where you want something really slim and portable, these were my big go-tos. But these are both using a Pilot G2 Mini. This in the middle is a full Parker. Just let that set in for a moment. They managed to fit a full Parker refill in a pen as small as things that normally would only ever be able to fit a mini G2. I'm gonna give you a couple more size comparisons, just to really let this truly sink in because of how amazing it is. This was my previous favorite ultra minimal Parker pen. This is from Smooth Precision Pens, and they don't even exist anymore, so you can't get this even if you want to, although you could try to hunt one down in secondary. This was the previous tiniest Parker I could find, and you can see how much bigger it is. This is a normal Parker. This is a normal Parker. This over here is a Pilot G2 Mini, but this is their Pilot G2 Mini. Like, oh my gosh, this just blows my mind. I can't get over how incredibly slim they've managed to make this. It is as portable as things that are much, much bigger than it, but it manages to fit the full-size refill you'd normally find in only a full-size pen. To really drill down on these specs, I've cleared off this board with the ones I think are the most comparable. And what we have here is the Tactile Turns Mini Side Click. This is the slim version, and all of their slim ones are going to be 0.366 inches. These Aerospace pens, both sizes, are sitting here at 0.3515. So they're slightly slimmer than this, but going to feel fairly similar to the Tactile Turn Slims if that's what you're used to. And this Oz Machine Co. Lil Jon, which previously was like, I think the absolute king for portability, is a particularly narrow 0.328. But again, if you just look at these side by side, they look almost exactly the same size in both length and thickness. It's crazy. As far as length goes, these two pens are almost exactly the same length if you're including their little pusher caps. These are 4.596, basically 4.6 inches long, and these are 4.57. Again, basically 4.6 inches long. Now, an interesting thing is that visually the length of them feels different. This feels shorter than this because the pusher plunger part at the top is so much narrower and because it's that different color. If you don't include that, this is 4.3 inches, which is why it looks so similar to this, because this is also 4.3 inches. And if you come down here, this baby one, we're looking at 3.88. Incredibly small pen. And when we're talking about weight, these are all very, very similar in weight. Technically speaking, this one is the heaviest, barely, and that's because it has a bronze component right here, and in the inside, we'll talk about that in just a moment, that adds a little bit extra weight, but this is 0.77 ounces. This one here is 0.67, so those are very, very similar in weight. This one's 0.63, and this one's 0.59. So if you do want the absolute slimmest and lightest, the Oz Lil Jon is still the slimmest. It's definitely not the most compact, and these use the exact same refill. But overall, these are all in that kind of 0.6 to 0.7 ounce range, and so they all feel like very, very light portable pens. Gosh, just looking at it, it never ceases to blow my mind that this is a full Parker refill. So let's back up and talk about that for a moment, because if you don't understand why I'm making such a big deal about that, when you get a pen like this, I love this pen. If you are into and enjoy bolt action pens and you want something ultra minimal, I highly recommend this pen. This pen is fantastic, but it's the kind of pen that's fantastic for like really quick jotting down notes. This isn't the kind of thing that I would want to write with all day long, because it just is so slim, and that little bit of extra thickness here does make a difference and does make this much more comfortable for long-term use. But I'm getting ahead of myself. When you get a pen like this, you are locked into a single refill. This can only take a Pilot G2 Mini. That's this short version of the Pilot G2 that you're very, very familiar with. And there's all sorts of benefits of that. I mean, I love the G2 refill. If you like gel ink refills, this is a fantastic one. But there are some really significant negatives. Namely, gel ink is slow to dry and is definitely going to smear for lefties. But the bigger thing is that you only have this one choice. This is it. There's no other refill on the market at all that fits into this pen. There are ways that you can hack ones to fit in to a degree, and there's ways that you can put adapters on even smaller ones to a degree. In fact, I'm actually planning a video all about how to fit other kinds of refills into something that tries to fit this, but they're not for the faint of heart. So for the vast majority of people, normal people, including me for the most part, if you buy a pen like this, you are locked into one and only refill type. There's all sorts of other problems in the sense that Pilot doesn't sell these on their own. You have to buy the full plastic pen with the clicky part and everything and just throw out all of that in order to get this refill. They've never sold them on their own. And they also only sell them in the 0.7 size. So if you want the 0.5, the 0.3, or the 1 or anything like that, you can't get them. And just a whole bunch of other obnoxious little things like that. And so not being trapped in this refill size is a really big positive. Now I say that knowing full well that one of the pens I'm talking about today uses that same refill. And everything I just said that's a negative about that is true of this pen too. This uses this refill and it only fits this refill. Now, these are common enough, and there's so many pens on the market that are designed around this that I'm not at all surprised that they wanted to make one too. It is definitely one of the best mini refills on the market, and it's really the only one that's widely available that has enough ink in it to be useful, that is as small as this and allows them to make a pen as small as this. And so if they wanted to make an ultra tiny pen for people that want true micro pen compatibility, this is really the only option they had, and I applaud them for making this. But the thing that's so much more compelling to me is this one. This is such an incredibly slim pen, and you get that full Parker refill. This one shipped with a Parker Quink Flow, and I'm very pleased with that, in part because I helped them pick it out. Completely unsolicited, I sent them a whole bunch of videos all about comparing different refills and trying to convince them at a minimum to use something along the lines of this. The thing I was really trying to get them to avoid was using, here, just a sec. Okay, this is a Schmidt P900, and this is what almost everyone ships with on the high-end space. Like even when you buy a $350 Grimsmo Saga, it ships with this. And I just hate this refill. It's a very reliable refill. I get it. It's nice for what it is, but it is a super old school ballpoint style refill. And so it takes a lot of pressure to write with. It doesn't flow very smoothly, and it just feels bad to write with. I kind of hate it. And so we don't have to have this anymore. Science and technology has evolved, and what we have these days are what are called hybrid low viscosity ballpoint pen refills like this one. This is the Quink Flow, and so it's also using their quick drying ink. But these types of refills have the same kind of base technology. It's an oil-based ink as a ballpoint pen. And so they can make things that are very quick drying, like I just mentioned, so they don't smear for folks. But they have 80% less viscosity than traditional ballpoint pens. And so they write so much smoother and more cleanly. And so I petitioned them to pick. I gave them a bunch of different varieties. This isn't my absolute favorite refill in the entire market, but I love this refill still. And so I was very pleased to see that they actually responded and said that they appreciated all of that and ended up going with the Quink Flow for the overall thing. But you have so much option at this space. When you can fit a full Parker refill, there are hundreds of options. And even if you like gel ink, like you can get with the Pilots, there are some great gel ink options in the Parker size. But there's everything in the Parker size. It is definitely the best refill size for them to target. And so I am blown away that it has the kind of flexibility and compatibility you get with a full Parker refill in such a slim form factor. Now, the same way that I said the Little John pen is really best suited for quick notes on the go, shoving in a field notes book, that kind of thing. It's not something I would want to write pages and pages with. I think that's probably true of the mini G2 size as well. This is so small that it works for my hands. I have medium glove size hands, and this is perfect for just short note taking, but this is tiny enough that I wouldn't want to write a whole bunch of pages with it. From a thickness perspective, it totally works for me, but from a length perspective, it's just a little bit small. And if you have big hands, this is going to feel like a micro pen for sure. But this full-size Parker one is just long enough that to me, this fills all of my needs of a full-size pen. It feels great to write with this. On the mini, the balance point is basically right where the end of the clip is. And on the full size, it's basically right in front. And so that puts the balance point right about here when I'm writing, which is a little bit forward for my preferences, but this pen doesn't feel unbalanced at all. And I vastly prefer a little bit forward compared to a little bit further back. I hate when pens are back heavy. It feels like it's swinging around all weird. And because there's no bolt sticking out anywhere, it's so comfortable to hold this in all the different angles. And because they did do things like little tiny chamfers in all these corners, if you do end up having the clip roll against you, it's not scratchy or anything. It's so well done. So now let's compare these two. Now they have the exact same width. Obviously this one is much shorter. I talked about the dimensions just a moment ago, but they did a really interesting thing. And I was actually finding it quite surprising. And that's that they didn't reuse either main body component across these two. So what I mean is that this top part and this bottom part are different across the two pens. It would have been really tempting for them to reuse one of those components. So for comparison, when Oz went from this Lil John up to the Long John, all he did was change the length on this part. He kept this piece exactly the same. If you buy a Lil John and a Long John, this is interchangeable between the two. He just extended this further down. And from a manufacturing perspective, that's really compelling because it means that you have fewer parts that you have to make. You can make a whole bunch of these and they work for everything you do. But the reason he's able to pull that off is because he's going from a mini G2 to a full-size G2, which means that this front part is exactly the same. All that's different is the length. And it would be tempting for folks like Aerocrafted to do the same thing over here, because the reality is this front part on those two refills is tremendously similar. They're both roughly 2.5 millimeters. And so it would have been very tempting for them to just reuse the exact same front nozzle portion and grip portion across both pens and simply make this top portion longer to have fewer parts. But that's not the kind of company that Aerocrafted is, because they know that the Parker standard, technically ISO G2 standard, means that there's some amount of flexibility in this size. These tend to be slightly larger. Technically speaking, it's not 2.5 millimeters, it's 2.54, but it's allowed to have some amount above or below that, that's the tolerance range, and still be within spec. And so they know that these tend to be slightly bigger than these, even though they look so incredibly similar. And so if they did try to reuse the components across both, they would end up with some amount of tip wiggle over here in order to make it so they can fit all of the different types of manufacturers and brands that make Parker compatible refills for over here. And some companies would have just let that happen. Some companies would have accepted that amount of kind of extra wiggle and slack in order to cut costs and save on manufacturing. But that's not the kind of company this is. They made sure that this has absolutely no perceivable tip wiggle over here and absolutely no perceivable tip wiggle over here. Now, I will say, because there is that acceptable variance and because there are so many different brands that manufacture Parker size refills, if you swap out a different refill over here, it's possible you might encounter the tiniest little bit of tip wiggle, and it could, because that piece would still be considered in spec even if it's slightly smaller. But as is, this is so imperceivable, and this is like literally none. That kind of tip wiggle is really important, because if there is tip wiggle, you'll feel that little kind of tap sensation every time you put your pen down. And if there's enough tip wiggle, like if they actually did try to use this part for these refills, you would actually feel the sway as you move side to side. The pen would move first and the refill would move second as it hits the other side. And so I am so thankful that they went out of their way to manufacture completely separate parts customized to each of the two refill sizes they make. Now, they did make a really interesting design choice independent of that. If you look, the barrels are shaped differently. They're not just longer, but this has a more acute, pointier tip, and that really changes the aesthetic. Even though these are the exact same thickness, that difference in tip makes this look squatter and wider. It makes this look longer and thinner. I don't know why they did that. That's an aesthetic thing. Internally, they could have machined these however they needed to, and they could have used this exact same shape on either side. But it's an interesting choice. And it does visually make this look like a full-size pen, longer, slimmer, all that kind of stuff. And it does make this look like a micro pen. Now, the parts that are reused across these are the plunger itself. We'll talk about it when we get to the mechanism, the clip, and this internal component. I showed this earlier, and the way that this works is there is a brass piece press fit into here at the front. So this is an entirely titanium piece, and then there is a separate brass piece that is interference fit into here, which means it's a permanent pressed in piece. It can't come out. But they did that so that they would have brass fittings here, which allow you to have very clean, tight engagement without any of that kind of risk of galling. Now they made very, very fine threads here, so they didn't need an O-ring because this is such fine threading that it is not going to come loose. But when you do it that way, if you're trying to do that titanium, that close of fine threading, things can get a little bit messy. And so they went out of their way to make sure that this piece here was made out of bronze to accommodate that. And yes, indeed, there is a little Higby thread. I always talk about that on pens. The Higby thread is a ramped thread at the start right here that makes it so that it won't cross thread when you put it in. Even if you're holding it slightly at an angle, it's still going to thread in smoothly. And they did a pretty darn good job of hiding this grip ring. Like you can, I think, tell that this is the one that splits, but they match pretty darn well. While I'm talking about this grip ring, I will say this is my one and only functional complaint, and it's less of a complaint and more of an observation. And that's that I don't find that these grip rings provide really significant grip. It is technically more traction-y down here, but if I'm trying to figure out how much pressure it takes to slide on this versus slide on this, I don't find them to be meaningfully different. So I gave them this feedback already, and maybe they'll change it in future runs. I would personally like to see these be a little bit more crisp, but I said this is more of an observation than a complaint because I've been using this pen for roughly 2 months now, and I've never once felt myself slipping at all. The finish on this is, I guess, some kind of, looks like a bead blast to me, is plenty grippy enough that I've never had any issues with this whatsoever. But I will say, if you're someone that finds you're slipping on pens all the time, or like Shabazz always says, if you work in a grease factory, so literally if you find that your hands are often slippery when you're using pens, you might find that this isn't grippy enough. But for me, it hasn't been a problem. Overall, I think the pen is just beautiful too. It's so slim and minimal. The one piece of aesthetic complaint that I have is that they simply put their name on it, period. Like, I have a lot of EDC pens and they just basically don't have billboarding on them. Sometimes they'll do what Tactile does and kind of put their name right there under the clip. Like, that's fun. I like that. Maybe they could do the same thing there. The reality is they do the same thing over on their side slip. Like, they write Aerocrafted on it, but they also put their logo. I wish that they just wouldn't. I'm the type of person that really leans towards minimalism, and especially when you have a pen that is so incredibly sleek as this, I would prefer strongly if they just left their name off. Now, I will say, their name, I like it. It's cool. Aerocrafted sounds cool, and it evokes that same aerospace thing. So I like their name. And the font they chose is nice and sleek and minimal. Like, it's the same thing we got going on here. It's clean. I like it. So if they have to put their name on it, I think they did a good job of picking a font and everything like that. But they don't have to put their name on it. They could have just put the little tiny logo. Like this Aerocrafted logo that they use, they could have just put that right there, or right there, or right there. That would be my favorite. If they want a branding on this at all, is to put the tiny little logo right there engraved in, that would have been ideal. However, it's not a deal breaker for me. I'd prefer without it, but it's still very clean and beautiful as is. And one thing I do think is really, really cool is that if you look at this, the color of it, it's laser engraved, right? And they managed to make it that same kind of bronze color as the cap. And so there actually is a really nice cohesiveness there. So like I said, for writing their name on a product, I think they did a really, really nice job of it. I just wish they wouldn't do it, period. Okay, let's talk about this clip, because this is one of the most impressive things, I think. Clips are often overthoughts on pens, but this clip is absolutely incredible. It is literally a beautiful, incredibly functioning clip, but it's also kind of an engineering and machining marvel, because look at this. This looks so much like it is one integral piece. There is no seam. There's no visible seam whatsoever. It looks like it has to be one integral piece. But think, how on earth would they machine that? The reality is, this actually is a separate piece. It's made completely separately, and then it is interference fit, again, press fit into this space. It is such a tight fit that it can't come out. It's never going to come out. But they then do a finishing pass after inserting it that completely eliminates the seam. It is absolutely flawless looking, and it is just, it's kind of mind-boggling every time I think about it. There's also a bunch of really nice little details. Like, look at this internal chamfer along the inside. A lot of pen companies forget to do that. Like, this inside bit right here is pretty crisp. And so seeing that little tiny chamfer right there, oh, I love details like that. It's also a very deep carry clip. It only has that much sticking out of your pocket. And so that's one of the best on the market, especially for the milled type variety. But then in terms of functionality itself, it has great spring retention. The one thing I will say is that the amount of clearance here is just slightly on the slim side. If you wear like incredibly thick pants, I haven't had any problem sliding this in and out of any pants that I own, but I know that there are some pants that have incredibly thick reinforced seams, and you might have difficulty. It might be a little bit of a tight fit, but this is perfect for regular pants, and especially for like your shirt pocket or sliding into some kind of like what I do is I slide it into my field notes book. I just stick it like this and I shove it in my pocket and I go. And it's perfect for something like that. So let's finally talk about this mechanism, because this is so freaking cool. So what's going on here is this plunger has a very specific shape. Because I have two of these, I can show you what it looks like in real time. And this is also a good time to talk about how you would disassemble this. If for some reason you ever want to take this piece out, all you have to do is take the pen out, like you're taking the refill out, and this just falls out. But that's it. It's just this piece. There's only this one piece. There's no springs, there's no fasteners, there's nothing to do. And so reassembling it is every bit as easy. You literally just drop it in and it comes out the back. But let's take this back out and compare. So what's going on at the top of this is there's this very specifically shaped piece. It has this slope down to this ridge, a flat barrel, and then a flat cap. This ridge at the bottom that I just called a cap, that's what's keeping it in the pen to begin with. There is a ring at the bottom down here. Yeah, you see that ridge? That's what the flat cap is resting on, and that's what prevents it from coming out the back of the pen, period. But that same ridge is what catches on this little corner if you push this down at an angle. So this cutout on the side right here allows this entire piece to push over to the side. And so you can either push straight down and then pull back, or you can push at an angle to begin with. And in either case, what's happening is this piece is sliding down, and that corner right there is catching on the same lip that was catching on this piece initially. Once you understand how this works, it is incredibly easy to use. And what's really neat about it, and one of the reasons why I really, really like this from a fidget perspective, is that it moves in so many different ways, or is capable of moving in so many different ways, that you can do all sorts of different fidgeting things with it. Like you can just kind of sit here and tap it against the side if you want to. It's fun. And you can do this completely silently. You can push it down and pull over. Or like I said, pushing against the side at an angle and pushing down makes it snap into place. Ooh, that's satisfying. And if you want to make a really nice snap, you can just kind of push off to the side to make it pop back up. Ooh. It's capable of being a very clicky pen, but also capable of being a very silent pen. It's rare that a mechanism can do both so well. Now, I did have a friend tell me that when he got his, it was kind of crunchy feeling if you push it off to the side at first. That wasn't my experience on this one. This was always incredibly smooth right off the bat, but I did notice that a tiny bit on the small one. There was a little bit of a roughness, just the slightest bit when I first took it out of the package, but it went away very quickly just from use. So if you find that there is any kind of scratchy resistance as you're pushing it in at an angle, that will go away. And now this is, yeah, that's effortlessly smooth. I love doing this kind of motion too. This kind of like click. Like intentionally. It's just a fun thing to play with. And I love so much the elegant simplicity in the fact there is literally just this one part. There's nothing that can go wrong here. There's no fasteners to come loose. There's no little parts to lose. This kind of elegant simplicity is so creative and clever. This is literally the only pen on the market that does something like this. It is so cool. But it's also one of the things that makes this technically not the best like grandma pen. If I'm stealing a term from the flashlight industry, people in the flashlight community call something a grandma flashlight if it's the kind of thing that is so utterly intuitive that you could hand it to your grandmother and they'd still be able to use it. That term came about because the flashlight community in particular has a lot of user interfaces that are really kind of confusing and not intuitive. And this is kind of in that direction. Reason why is because this is a plunger, right? This is a push button mechanism. And so people think to go like this. But look what happens when I let go. It just comes right back out. So I have handed this to people, including pen people, and had them kind of sit there and go like this and kind of stare at me with puzzlement. But you see how it just stayed in? Most of the time when I've handed this to people, they either get it immediately by looking at it and recognize how to make it do that, or they accidentally click it and they're like, oh. But I technically have had people sit there and do this. So let's talk about my final thoughts on this pen before we get to how you can win one of these. Honestly, I absolutely love it. I am blown away by how good everything is. There's so much little detail put into everything. The tiny chamfers around every single little spot, every single little thing is so incredibly well finished. It is the perfect size for me for everyday use in general, but it's so slim and compact that it is also the perfect size for travel. And if you really want minimalist for travel, you can't get any smaller than this. It's so well done. But to me, the ability to have a full-size Parker refill and all of the options that brings in something so compact, I'm blown away. It's so freaking cool. And this mechanism, so clever, so fun to play with, but also so practical with it being something that you can do completely silently. This is the kind of creativity, engineering, and manufacturing prowess that I have come to expect from Aerocrafted, and that makes me love them so much. Their products are so well thought out and so minimal. It's just kind of mind-blowing. These pens are officially available on their site now. Now that Kickstarter's over and they fulfilled all of that, they're available for regular purchase on their site. And they're priced at $98, which is very competitive for a US-made titanium pen. It's actually kind of mind-boggling that they're able to do it as cheap as they are, given how small of a company they are. But I also have a promo code that you can use. If you use Knife Nerdery at checkout, you can save 15% off, which takes us from $98 down to $83.30. And that's not like a one-time use code. You can use that anytime you shop with them. You'll get 15% off every time on anything. And so the fact that you can get this for $83, like I know there are people out there that will hear $83 for a pen and just have their jaw drop. But if you're familiar with this space, if you know what these other pens end up costing, the fact that you can get something like this for $83 is genuinely shocking to me. It is excellent value for your money. I cannot recommend it enough. I cannot recommend this company enough. Everything they do is so freaking cool. You got to go check them out. Okay, let's talk giveaway. So you're going to get one of these full-size Parker compatible pens sealed in case. Everything is brand new, never been touched, and you get a smattering of little stickers too. So how do you enter? All you have to do is leave a comment on this video. You can write literally anything you want. I will say, if you write something really nasty or awful or spam or something like that, I will delete those so that you'll be disqualified. But assuming you can even just write in or something, but all you have to do is leave a comment on this video. As far as who is eligible, unfortunately, I do have to limit this to US entries only. I know, I really wish I could do it overseas, but I learned a bunch recently about how that works in terms of legality, and it turns out that having overseas customers pay for shipping technically legally counts as them paying to enter, and then now you're into illegal lottery territory. So unfortunately, I have to limit this to US customers, but I'll be paying all of the shipping. All you have to do is leave a comment to enter, and you will get this completely free. Also, this is a pen, so I'm not aware of anywhere in the world having age restraints or size carryability restraints or anything like that on pens. But I will say, if you're the type of person that is young enough that you have to ask a parent for permission to do things in general, probably a good idea to ask them permission to enter this. I will draw the winner for this exactly 1 week from when this goes up. I'm not 100% sure when this go up. It might go up Friday. That's the day that these are dropping. It might go up the day after, depending how busy I am. But I'll leave it open for exactly 1 week, and the winner will be announced in a video on this channel. It's the only way that you will be notified if you win. So please do not fall for scams. There will absolutely be scam accounts that will tell you, hey, you've won, message this number, and hey, you just have to pay some money for shipping or something like that. Don't fall for scams. Only way a winner will be announced is in a video on this channel. So it's that easy. You just have to leave a comment. That's all there is to it. Huge thank you to Aerocrafted for the opportunity to host this giveaway. I think it's incredibly cool of them to do this. I know whoever wins this is going to love it. And huge thanks also for sending me this one to check out. I think this is such a perfect pen. Seriously, I love your products. Thank you for making stuff like this. Thank you all for watching. I'll catch you all next time.